Well, I guess this is what we call a year. Cheers. Welcome back, everybody, to me doing the thing that I do once per year, and that is, of course, looking back at what happened on this channel and in general and so forth during the year, and then maybe talk a bit about what I plan to do next year, in case I do have plans and all of that. So that's what we'll do today, looking at 2024 as, what happened to the channel, what happened reading-wise, all of those things, what kind of books stood out to me, what kind of books maybe didn't stand out to me, if there were disappointments, that kind of stuff, and then, look at projects that I started, failed, all of that stuff, and figure out where things might be going. And of course, this is basically a bonus because at the same time, Mousemas is continuing. Actually, the video for today is rendering as we speak. So yeah, let's sit back and talk about all the things that happened or didn't happen. And before we move further, I'll just mention the thing. I have now actually found a way to start those channel memberships. I talked about it in the weekly navel gazing yesterday, but in case you don't watch those, which I understand, yeah, there is an option for you to become a channel member. You get nothing for it, but I get money for it, which is, nice for me. I get, I guess, €1.40 or something of the sorts if you pay €1.99, which is, Google taking money as well. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to mention. There's no pressure to do that. I just, try to pretend that I know what I'm doing, which, is wrong. So let's talk about all the things I did and numbers and all of that stuff, because was it a good year? Was it a bad year? Was it a year? I don't know. Now, the very first part is, of course, subscriber numbers, because YouTube loves numbers, and I sure as hell don't. At the beginning of the year, I was at roughly 1,250 subscribers. The year before, I was at 1,000 subscribers, so I thought, maybe I'll reach 1,500 this year. Wouldn't that be nice? Turns out, that failed. Yesterday, I was at 1,450. Now I'm back at 1,449. Those numbers kind of fluctuate a little bit, back up and down and so forth. But certainly, the channel growth has at least further stagnated compared to the first years of the channel. There's a lot of reasons for that, I assume, and some of them may be up to me, some of them may just be, the world changing, all of that stuff. Certainly something I'm thinking about, obviously, even though I try not to, but, it is what it is. And, they are stagnating. One reason why this may be the case is something we'll talk about a little more, obviously, later, is that I had a break of 2 months or something earlier in 2024 during March and April, when I did not have a working camera because for whatever reasons, my first camera broke, and then my phone camera also failed and or didn't work anymore for weird, obscure technology reasons, and that meant I didn't post any videos. And obviously, not posting videos means chances are lower that people find your channel and click on your channel or subscribe and so forth. So, if I want to be positive about this, I would argue that if I hadn't had that break, I might have reached that goal of 1,500 subscribers. Hasn't happened. I think the other part, of course, is, and that's certainly something I've noticed, is that while the subscriber numbers are slowly going up, view numbers are pretty low compared to, say, earlier videos and earlier stuff. And partly that may be something that I've been thinking about a lot, which is, of course, what the channel is doing and where the channel is going. And we'll talk about that in a bit, don't worry. I started this channel mostly talking about the Malazan Book of the Fallen, or the Malazan Universe by Stephen Erickson and Ian Cameron, Cam Esselman, that's the name, Ian Cameron Esselman, that's the, I'm confused today. Anyway, so I started doing that, and at the time in the year, 2020, 2021, we all were sitting at home because of a plague and had nothing but Malazans, or nothing to do but watching YouTube videos or making YouTube videos, or at least more time doing that. And at that specific era, the Malazan stuff kind of blew up for a moment. It's, when people call it MalazTube, and Philip Chase started, or switched towards this specific channel and this specific topic for a while, and there was Andy Smith doing stuff, and a lot of booktubers started talking about Malazan at that time, and I gained quite a few subscribers at that point because of, doing something that everyone else was also doing, which is, talk about Malazan. That has obviously shifted because after 1 year, I was more or less done with the Malazan Book of the Fallen, or anything that was published out of those books. There are some minor exceptions. One of those is that I still haven't talked about or read the stories of Tales of Beauchelin and Corbel Broach. Reason being, those were a long time not available in audio at all, and then they were published as audiobooks, but region locked away from people like me over here in Europe, because, we may enjoy capitalism on the one hand, but we also really, really hate humans, and licensing is a bit of a mess when it comes to publishing for all kinds of reasons, and so I did not have access to these stories of Beauchelin and Corbel Broach. Now, this may, in fact, change this year for reasons. I may have found a way to access those books, and then I will, of course, buy them and listen to them, and then I will obviously talk about them. Obviously, another thing is, of course, that there is a new book by Stephen Erickson slated to come out later this year. In October, I think, is when No Life Forsaken, the second book of Witness, will come out, and obviously I will talk about that. Now, will that make a big difference? I don't know, because, maybe the Malazan wave has also somewhat ebbed, and, things have changed in those last 4 years, is what I'm saying, mostly. So that's certainly one reason why I think numbers are not necessarily as large as they were in a lot of ways, because people that subscribe for Malazan content may not be really interested in me talking about the books that I'm currently talking about for all kinds of reasons. That's just, one of those things that people always tell you about YouTube is, if you change your brand, so to speak, and I hate those words in a lot of ways, then, you leave people behind, and it's kind of hard to find a new audience depending on what you do. So that's certainly one reason why maybe the average view numbers are down compared to the number of subscribers in a lot of ways, and that's just something I obviously look at from time to time, but I try not to get too distracted by it. I'd be lying if I said it wouldn't frustrate me, especially since I think a lot of the stuff I've been talking about this year was actually pretty good, and some of the videos were, I think, pretty solid, but it is what it is. I can't change that. So number-wise, this has not necessarily been a good year. In fact, I think it's been probably the worst year I've had so far on YouTube for all kinds of reasons. We'll look more into that later on. Obviously, the problem with both view numbers and subscriber numbers is that these are mostly out of my control, mostly out of any YouTuber's control. Yes, you can sort of do things where you feel they might be successful and can sort of shape your content towards gaining numbers, but at the end of the day, we are all sort of at the mercy of both YouTube's algorithms of recommendations and so forth, and the larger world, which we have very little, influence on. If, the world burns out there because people decide to vote for fascists or commit genocide or do all of these wonderful things that people are doing at the moment, and people have better things to do with their lives than to watch, videos about fantasy books, that's something I can't influence. And that means that sort of hanging the identity or the welfare of a channel, or the way we feel about that, the confidence and so forth, ideas of self-worth on those specific numbers, I think is dangerous. Obviously, it's the way that YouTube kind of markets this to us content creators by forcing us to see those numbers whenever we open the website, because clearly we need to go and make more videos so they can make that YouTube can make more money of ads and all of that stuff. But it can be very unhealthy, and we've spoken about that with the whole idea of the dark side of booktube and things like that, and but that shit's real, is what I'm saying. Now, I personally think it is healthier for me, at least, if I sort of judge the success or lack of success of the channel with other forms of other metrics, like maybe how many live streams I do, how many videos I made, what kind of videos I've made, that kind of stuff. I think is because that's what I have an influence over, right? I can make videos and go well, I've made this many videos, clearly that's good, or at least that's something, right? So that's kind of what I want to look at for the next part before I move further away. And I think with that break, that forced break because of tech issues and no camera and so forth, I think I've been pretty good when it comes to videos. There are some projects that I have, unfortunately, let slip for a while, and we'll talk about those things in a moment, but I've certainly, done some things. For example, I finally managed to finish my series on the main novels of the Black Company series by Glenn Cook. That's something I started way back during my first year on BookTube, and kind of it all kind of faltered for a while, but last year I managed to actually finish those, which is nice. Feels nice to have something actually wrapped up for once. So that's something I did, and I think I started a new series that I'm very happy with and very proud of, and that is, of course, me going through all the Ian MacDonald novels that I have access to, which is unfortunately not all of them, but, it is what it is, and going through those, because while I personally really, really appreciate Ian MacDonald's writing and have been a fan of his writing for a long time, he's not exactly an author that gets a lot of, screen time on YouTube or is mentioned on YouTube a lot, and I think that what I've been doing with those videos so far, I think I have found a way to contribute something to BookTube in that regard, where I talk about these kind of books, explain why I think they're good. Also, by going through them in publication order, I can, look at how a writer's career has, changed over time. That's something I'm proud of, because so far I feel they are really good. Obviously, the numbers are really bad, but that's the next part of. I can't necessarily change that, but if I want to talk about authors that matter to me, and not authors that I know will get good numbers, like Brandon Sanderson or George R. Martin or any of those, that's just what I have to live with. I can't expect all of BookTube suddenly looking for Ian MacDonald videos, because clearly there's no large market for those books, even, to be fair, and that's certainly something I have to live with, and I think I've slowly made my peace with that. There have been other videos and other books that I've talked about this year. Earlier, in the beginning of the year, I made a video of all the books I plan to read when they come out and talk about them when they come out, and I've mostly stuck to that, I think. And I'm happy to say that most of the books on that list were actually really good. I think the one that I mentioned that I did not make a video about was, in fact, Machine Vendetta by Alistair Reynolds. But since that's the third book in a series, there were reasons why I did not make videos on those. And I could have, gone back and made videos about the entire series. Maybe at some point I will go back and talk about the entire, Revelation Space universe and books when I go and maybe reread those, but for now that's not something that happened. But I talked about I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons, I talked about Navola, I've talked about The Bright Sword, I've talked about all of those books that I had on that list of stuff that I wanted to talk about when it came out, with the exception of course, The Navigator's Children and the general Last King of Ostenard series by Ted Williams, because, I got sidetracked and those are massive books and I just haven't read those yet, so what can I say? But in general, I think I was pretty good on that, the list of books that I wanted to talk about, and some of them did fairly well. That's certainly something I always enjoyed. Some of those books got positive feedback, The Bright Sword. I think a lot of people enjoyed that video, so that's nice. So in general, I think my videos talking about individual books, while, when they came out, was successful in that I feel I picked interesting books, and I was very happy with those books that I read. I don't think I have many, least favorite books or anything of the sort. There were no big disappointments in new books I picked up and was expecting to be. There were no disappointments. Obviously, there were books I read that I think are trash, but I already knew that when I started reading them, because I was reading them for something, research-wise, right? So in that regard, I think I did pretty good, and that's certainly something that I found helpful. And in a lot of ways, what I really appreciated about that is that a couple of times authors or other people from the publishing industry in that regard, like editors and authors, commented on those videos or shared them and said nice things about my videos. And this is not the famed reviewer space where I don't welcome authors' opinions. That's not the kind of videos I make. If I go and do a deeper analysis of, the style and the themes and so forth, and an author feels that they want to comment on that, then they are always more than welcome to do so, because I'd rather have a conversation about these themes and do that sort of form of book content than just go well, 5 stars or 3 stars and then argue about whether my star rating is okay or not, because it's, that's not what I'm doing here. So that felt nice. That's like, I guess, like another one of those sort of ways of judging success or of a channel is if people that are involved, if artists, if writers and editors and so forth comment and seem to think my contribution to larger book discourse is valuable. That's a form of appreciation, of respect that I do very much appreciate on the on, because the question is always like, what do we do when we make these kind of content, right? For whom is me rambling on the internet? Is that for me? Is that for you? Is that for the people whose books I am rambling about? That's a difficult question, obviously. Like, I can only just like put stuff out and hope it finds an audience, but having that specific sort of like feedback is certainly helpful, at least for someone like me who is constantly insecure about the things they say on the internet, which I know is hard to believe, but that's certainly the case in a lot of ways. So that's something I wanted to mention as what I would call a success, that several authors, shared those videos and had nice things to say about them. That's nice. That's really good. I hope this will maybe continue next year. We will see. And if I am very lucky, I might actually get my shit together and ask some more authors to talk to me about these, their books and so forth. I managed to do one of those this year, which was, of course, a conversation with Lavi Tidar that I had in August, September, around that time. And I'm very happy with that one. I had fun. I hope Lavi had fun. I hope those of you who have watched the video had fun and learned something. That's certainly something I want to go back to. My problem is, of course, that I am incredibly insecure and get like a full-on panic attack before I manage to message an author or their agent. It took me like 4 months and a lot of people yelling at me to finally message, Lavi's agent, which I, then did. And that's a me problem. It's very much a me problem, but I try to have more of these kind of conversations because I think they can be interesting to people who've either read those books or just to see or like hear more thoughts on like the how authors approach their crafting of stories and writing and thought processes behind that. That's something I wanted to explore more because that's where my interests, I guess, lie in a lot of ways. So that is another thing where I'm fairly happy with what I've done or achieved. In general, I feel also when I look at the books that I've talked about this year, there's certainly a tendency in which my book interests are moving in a lot of ways. That is certainly the away from what you might call booktube mainstream or like adult fantasy booktube mainstream. Me talking about books like Primi Mohamed's A Siege of Burning Grass or August Clarke's Metal from Heaven or Margaret Killjoy's The Sapling Cage. Those are books that are certainly political in a lot of ways, that are politically progressive and left leaning, I guess, is what you might call them, simply by, talking about topics like queerness and resistance, non-violent resistance, pacifism, anarchism, those kind of topics, right? And that's certainly something I'm very much interested in as a person. And that's sort of where my reading in fantasy and science fiction is also moving. I have always said that I think all art is political. You already know that, right? But I am looking at books where I think, books that I feel have something to say about the world right now and have something valuable to say about the world right now. And I will definitely continue reading books that go in that specific direction, because that's always been the kind of books that I've enjoyed. And that's certainly where I feel the channel has shifted. Maybe my reading has shifted in that direction up to a point. And I would argue I'm very happy with that. I did spend a lot of reading this year that has not made it necessarily explicitly into videos, but like implicitly into videos, because I've obviously read a lot of non-fiction books and academic books, some of them on literary criticism, some of them on, fantasy literature and criticism of fantasy literature and theory of fantasy and science fiction. I have not studied literary theory. I've not studied literature. I have studied different things, and I am trying to slowly sort of educate myself on how to talk about books, basically, because I feel that would in some form benefit my videos in a lot of ways. I'm trying to, improve what I'm doing here. And looking back at at the videos, I think that is something that has happened. I feel my book videos have become better in that regard. The way that I've settled on, a format where I give like a quick sort of like introduction what the book is, spoiler free, and go like, well, go read the book, and then I talk about certain themes, topics, elements. Sometimes it's like the style, sometimes it's themes, sometimes it's, character exploration, all of those things that make a book stand out to me. I think that's a format that I'm very happy with. Obviously, the downside is that it kind of only works if you have either no interest in, no worries about spoilers, or have already read the book, which, once again, if you talk about books like, say, Ian MacDonald's books, that number is fairly small, but I think those might be ways of videos that have a more long-term effect, because that's something you can come back to when you read the book in a year or in 2 years and 3 years, whenever you feel like reading a specific book. And I think in that regard, my slowly growing knowledge of literary theory and other elements of of the nonfiction stuff and academic stuff that I've been reading has sort of improved my scope, or the scope of what I'm able to talk about, or the way I feel qualified talking about stuff. And I think that's certainly where I would argue that my videos have gotten better, content-wise better, when it comes to how I talk about books. I feel fairly confident about that. And you can always tell me that I'm wrong about that if you feel like it. There's a comment section down below, and I'm obviously very much hoping that you will comment on this video and give me your thoughts of how you feel I've done this year. So that's certainly something I'm looking forward to, if you feel like it. But yeah, that's where I see where my content has sort of become better. The other thing I feel that I enjoyed is I managed to do another year of monthly live streams. I think I've managed to do one every month, more or less, with maybe a break in August or something around the whole festival season when stuff gets difficult. And I enjoy those live streams a lot. And I've managed to have a bunch of cool people as guests this time, right? We've had Kat from Fairy Librarian. We've had Cleo from Bemused Bookworm. And we've had, Britton as, from Some Okie Dude. And it's something I enjoy, sort of having people on. Amanda from a Strange Mentality paper earlier in the year as well, right? People that don't necessarily show up in the usual sort of booktube collaborations and live streams. And that's something I said last year, that I want to do that, because I was frustrated that I don't necessarily get invited to a lot of collaborations. That hasn't changed. I think it's probably gotten even worse. So I decided, and I said what I wanted to do is to find channels that are possibly smaller than mine, and sort of present those kind of people to you guys, so you maybe discover cool and interesting channels by people that have interesting things to say, interesting to me. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to agree with what those people say. It doesn't necessarily mean I have the same taste as those booktubers, but there's something to talk about where I can possibly learn something. We have a fruitful discussion. That's certainly something I hope I managed. And as I said, I'm very happy that I managed to invite a couple of people. I should probably get better at this as well. We just had a live stream on Friday where I did not invite anyone because I didn't find anyone. Maybe that's just, because I'm bad at contacting people, even if it's just booktubers, right? I have the same anxiety issue where I'm really, really bad at, messaging folks. But maybe, and it's also, between the holiday season, it's kind of difficult to find people. So that's that. But in general, I feel the live streams have been fun, and I'll try to continue doing those. So that's another thing where I feel the channel worked, right? Were all of the live streams good? Probably not. Did I have fun? Yes. Did you have fun? Hopefully. But you can, once again, tell me so in the comments, or you can tell me that I'm completely wrong and misjudging and misreading this. And we will see how that goes. Now let's look at a couple of other things video-wise before we talk about, the books that I think have stood out to me in general. And that is, of course, the projects. And there I would argue I have definitely failed, right? I always talk about how I want to do larger projects. And early this year I said that I wanted to do a larger project about, Brandon Sanderson in general, his works, and stuff that I find annoying about him. That's a project that has been around since even 2023, when I got so pissed off about the whole, like, Wired and Esquire articles about him, like, and all of that stuff. And well, that video is not out yet. That's certainly what I would consider me failing. At least failing in some way or form. And then I said I would do like another video that would be about conspiracy fiction. That one's also not out yet. And that's certainly, once again, something I would consider failure. Because I made goals and I did not hit those goals. Now, I can come up with reasons why that is the case. And there are certainly good reasons and there are bad reasons. Obviously, the whole, like, having 2 months of no videos and so forth did also cut into that, because it kind of put a break or stop to me working on the Sanderson video, and then I got sidetracked by the other project. And if I had not, had that break, possibly the Sanderson project would be further along. And that's certainly annoying, because my hope was to have the Sanderson thing out by the time Wind and Truth comes out. But, I have found some form of peace here. What I've learned throughout this process, however, is that these large projects, which are something I really, really want to do more of, because I do believe that is one of my strengths, is that I have, a broader background in history, philosophy, and all of those things that could allow me to make videos about bookish topics that go beyond just book reviews. And I think I hope there's room and space for this on YouTube. Whether you would call that booktube or call that something else, I don't know. But I think, and I hope there is space for that, and that's something I could contribute to. Now, what I need to figure out there is, of course, how to do that in a more efficient way. And that's certainly an ongoing problem. There's, stuff that comes into that, right? Me having a lot of anxieties and mental health issues around finishing projects. That's partly ADHD. It's partly having, recovering from depression, all kinds of other stuff in there. And that's certainly an ongoing process to figure out ways to trick myself into finishing these kind of projects. There's also the idea of, like, how can I be more efficient in these kind of things? Do I need to read 25 books on Mormonism just to be able to criticize Brandon Sanderson? Probably not. And even if so, how do I find a more efficient way to read and then turn that into a script and turn that into a video? That's certainly a process that I'm hopefully getting better at. We will find out. But in, that regard, having these kind of videos, I think we can call 2024 a bit of a failure. And yes, that's just like what I have to live with for now. One other thing that I find somewhat, I don't know what to do about this, right, is another form of video that I made a couple of. And I said numbers are a bit difficult, and, hoping for view numbers is always a bad thing. However, there is one thing I figured out, or something that I could have, take as a lesson from 2024, is when I make videos about what you might call drama. Those get better numbers than my videos talking about specific books. So if I talk about the dark side of booktube, or if I talk about the Cormac McCarthy thing, or the Neil Gaiman thing, or something else where I react, reply, respond, whatever you want to call it, to other booktubers, that's going to get better numbers. And I don't know what I think about that, because it's obviously tempting to do that, but there's a tendency to just be even more annoying, to also bring in a form of negativity that I don't want to have in there, right? Like, if I respond to someone like Johan from Library of a Viking, it's not because I actively dislike him or anything of the sort. I feel he said something that I need to add context to. That's sort of like where I'm at with this, right? But there will always be people who dislike the person I'm talking about, and they will just flood in and talk about that. And there is a tendency to be, somewhat to fall for that and continue down that road. And I don't want to do that, right? It's the same reason why I don't want to talk about books where I already know that I'm not the target audience, but why I haven't made a video on, say, Fourth Wing or anything of the sort, because, yeah, who's winning from me reading a book that I know I'll hate, and there's nothing more to say, because, yeah, it's just not written for me, right? It's not what I want to do, because there's, space for that on YouTube, and people can be incredibly successful with that, but I don't want to do that kind of content. So that's something I have to figure out, because on the other hand, since I care about books and care about bookish discourse in a lot of ways, I do feel like I have to sometimes step in and talk about these things, because, that's all I do here is talk about books and why I think they're good or bad. And if I disagree with other people, that's something I need to speak out about. And when it's something like, say, Neil Gaiman accusations and all that stuff, or the McCarthy revelations stuff recently, then yeah, of course I need to talk about that. And I need to find a way of doing that respectfully and not try to find drama to get a quick sort of like drama video out, which will get good numbers. I don't want to do that. So I'm somewhat ambivalent about how those videos did, because yes, they did well, and I wish other videos would have done better, is probably where I'm standing with this. So that's something that I think I wanted to spend, a few minutes talking about for 2024. Then let's talk about collaborations one final time. It's pretty depressing. I've joked about the fact that I feel like I'm not exactly part of booktube, and I think that is sort of a case in a lot of ways. There are very few people active on booktube who are willingly reaching out to me and asking me to join in any collaborations. Whether it's submitting a video or whether it's being invited on a live stream, that does very rarely happen. There's Britain, and there's Liam, and there's Amanda from Strange Mentality Paper. Those are the three people that have actively asked me to come onto their channels. I couldn't make it to Liam's Day of the Skull this year because it was like at 4 a.m, and I, did not get home because of other things until like 2 a.m, and that just didn't work out. But I'm very, very, very thankful for people reaching out to me, and I appreciate that. But it certainly says a lot compared to, other channels on booktube that get to, show up on other people's channels a lot. Just doesn't happen to me. And that's probably a me problem, me being really bad at keeping up with like social contacts. It's probably also me having a very specific style of talking about stuff and being very emphatic about my opinions that probably makes people uncomfortable asking me to join them for a conversation. I'm aware of that, but it's certainly, I'm not sure if it's something I can fix, right? I can try to control me, taking over entire conversations. It's, struggling against ADHD in that regard, certainly, but it's also, something where I don't know what to do about that. It is a fact, and if, my content and the way I do things is moving away from what you might call booktube mainstream, that's just something I will have to live with. And, I've given up on that. Like, if you are a booktube and you want to contact me, please do so. I always happily respond. I'm just really, really, awkward when it comes to reaching out to other booktubers, and I'm aware of that being, once again, also my fault. So that's certainly something I wanted to mention. With all of that said, let's talk about the books I read this year, and just like mention some that I was really, really happy about, because as I said, there were no like disappointments that I wasn't aware of would be disappointments while going in. According to Goodreads, I have read 180 books this year. That's a whole fucking lot, just to be clear. And some of them were rereads. A lot of them were rereads, in fact. A lot of them were sort of academic stuff. A lot of them was, non-fiction academic stuff. And I'll definitely continue talking about those from time to time. But some of them were new fiction books as well. And there's a few I wanted to highlight as stuff that has certainly impacted me and my reading this year, and will probably influence what I will be reading next year as well. So let's talk about books that stood out to me. And the first one is Ada Palmer's Terra Ignota series. I read this earlier this year, finally, after people telling me I should read it for a while. Y'all were right. That's what I'm saying, right? Y'all were right. I should have read this earlier. It is a series that is very much written just for me. Well, not just for me, but I, with, my failed PhD in 18th century philosophy of religion, find a lot of stuff in there that is just, glorious. And there's so much more to that series. I haven't made any videos on it yet, but it's certainly something that will happen in the future. So yeah, Terra Ignota by Ada Palmer certainly had a huge impact on me this year. There have obviously been other books over the year that have had some impact on me. I finally got to read Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco, and once again, that's a book that was very clearly written for me, and now that there is an unabridged audiobook, I'm very happy that I got that. Cool, right? So those are certainly books that I wanted to mention that had an impact on me, and that, if you haven't read those, go read them. They're really good. If you want to, deal with nerd shit in this regard. Other books that I think had a huge impact on me were that came out in 2024, and this is not a ranking or anything of the sorts. I'm probably forgetting books as well because, brain. Definitely Silvia Moreno Garcia's The Seventh Whale of Salome, another author that I hadn't read before, and I should have probably started earlier. Certainly really enjoyed that one, and I'm going to read more of her books in the future. I'm very sure of that. The same goes for Nalo Hopkinson and Blackheart Man. Certainly a book that had a huge impact on me because, it's really cool. I had read The Salt Roads before, and I really enjoyed this one being, more of a fantasy book and having some really cool things to say about, or showing what you can do with a very traditional sort of fantasy approach to fantasy and still say a lot of interesting things. Certainly a book that had a huge impact on me in that regard. The Sapling Cage by Margaret Killjoy, because trans witches are cool. Also, it's probably closer to what you might call a YA series, YA book, but it worked really well in a more wholesome way, and, I'm glad I read it, is what I'm saying. And I will read the other books of that series when or if they come out, so that's something. Premi Mohamed, definitely. The Siege of Burning Grass absolutely blew me away. I'll read more Premi Mohamed whenever I get to it. Certainly gonna happen. I can promise that. Another one being, of course, Metal from Heaven. Certainly another one by August Clark. These are recent, so they're fresher in my memory, and they were really good. Really appreciated those books. I did also really enjoy John Harrison's Sunken Land Begins to Rise Again, Gog Magog, Lud Luda. Those are really cool books that really sort of like stuff that is not traditional fantasy, and I really enjoyed those books. Those I want to, sort of highlight in that regard, and I will be reading more stuff in that direction in the future for sure. Going back and rereading a lot of these Ian MacDonald books, and sometimes reading them for the first time, certainly also had a huge impact on me because, those are just brilliant books and what people need to read Ian MacDonald. So that's certainly books that I wanted to mention in that regard. Books that I read and knew were shit were, of course, the Dan Brown novels. I did not remember them being this shit, but obviously I have grown as a reader and read more, and I understand more. And they're shit. We'll talk about that at some point in the future. So those are, I think, mostly the books that I wanted to sort of point out. There might be others that I'm currently forgetting. I did really enjoy I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons, of course, and there are probably other stuff that I've just completely lost track of. Paolo Bacigalupi's Navola was really good. It was a really good reading year for me, is I guess where I'm ending on with this specific aspect. I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, the final thing that you're hopefully watching at the moment, Mousemas. I really, really enjoy reading these Redwall books. I've never read them before because when I was in the age that you normally read those books, they weren't available or well known enough in Germany for me to get to them. And now I'm going through them and I'm really enjoying them. And that's really cool. And the fact that I've managed to have one Redwall video out per day so far is also making me very happy because it shows that I am, in fact, capable of, sticking to a schedule sometimes at least. So that's roughly my thoughts on 2024. It's a mixed bag. I feel I have gotten even more political, more overtly political. I feel I have gotten more competent at talking about stuff. And I feel that I've read a lot of really interesting books. I have failed at getting, projects done, but and I've certainly failed at any numbers games, but at least some people whose opinion really matters to me think that my videos are good, and that's also cool. And of course, I've had a lot of interesting conversations with you guys in comments, on Discord servers, all of that stuff. And that's, obviously the most important part of this. I wouldn't do this if there wasn't, any feedback or any conversations with you, because that's, what matters to me. Which brings me to the second part of this video, which will be somewhat shorter, and it's of course the question, what now? What will 2025 bring us? Do I have plans? And if so, what might they be? Well, the main plan is of course to finish Mousemas right now, which is going on until the 6th, and we'll see if I manage to actually get all of those videos out each day one. So far I'm good on track, so hopefully, fingers crossed. And yeah, beyond that, I will, of course, return to the Sanderstorm. I've spoken about it. I have figured out ways of doing this. And once this whole thing is over on the 7th, I will return to creating that Sanderson video. Now that there is no actual deadline, I hope I'll be able to give it the attention it deserves, and then we'll do exactly that. Talk about Mormonism, talk about each of the Sanderson novels in publication order, the Cosmere ones, at least the ones that I've decided to talk about, and then end this all off with, one final video on his marketing, his behavior or persona online, all of that stuff, which is what I really wanted to do in the first place back in 2023. It'll take a while, but it'll happen. That's sort of like my main goal there. Beyond that, I'll continue to make live streams once per month. I'll try to invite some interesting, cool booktubers that I feel, are worth your time. I will hopefully manage to convince myself to talk to some more authors. That will be really cool. And I'll make that video on conspiracy fiction, which will obviously take a long time to get there. There is, of course, also the idea of continuing what I started calling Sunday School back in the day when we talked about those Guy Gavriel Kay novels. There's a new one coming out later this year. I don't know how much time that'll take and how long I will do that, but I would love to come back and maybe continue with the next one being obviously A Song for Arbonne and how historical fiction or history can be a lens to read fantasy through. That's something I want to get back to. I want to continue talking about the culture novels by Ian M. Banks. I want to finish the read-along for Discworld. There's only 2 books left. That's something I want to finish. Beyond that, I already mentioned it. I want to go and read the Last Prince of Austin art books to finish that part off. And I'll look for new books coming out. I have started collecting books, and just like last year, I'll make a video in a couple of days, sometime next week, with a list of books that I am looking forward to in this year that I plan on reading whenever they come out and talk about them immediately. We'll see how that one goes. There's certainly some interesting books. I already, hinted at some in this video, so that will also very much happen. And beyond that, I don't know. I already mentioned that I want to make this slightly more professional. I'd love to actually get this shit, further along, figure out how to do YouTube somewhat more professionally, because, if I might as well take it a bit more seriously. I think that's one major thing that I want to continue. I have done all these morning sprints. I've mentioned that. Oh, I forgot to mention that earlier, but I've done those the last couple of months, or 2 months, I guess. I'll probably get back to doing those. They have been fun, and maybe the whole project of me actually writing something will also lead to something in 2025. I don't want to give myself any deadlines there because we already know how deadlines and me work. But wouldn't it be neat if I can actually finish some piece of writing and then I can talk about what I've learned from writing a book or something-ish, bookish, you know what I mean. We'll see how that goes. So basically do the same things that I've done last year, only more so and maybe better. If I could find ways to make my videos less just me sitting in front of a camera and yelling at you, rambling at you, that's something I'd love to do. I just don't know how to do that because I can't read scripts, obviously, and I don't know. Maybe I'll come up with a good idea. We'll see. So that's roughly the point. Would I love to do more collabs on other booktubers' channels? Course, but as I said, I feel like I'm slowly moving out of what might be called booktube or mainstream booktube, if I ever was a part of that, and that's not going to change. I'm not going to change in that direction, so I guess that's just, not going to happen. If people want to talk to me, they know where to find me, I suppose. And beyond that, I guess I might just get even more angry looking at the world outside, looking at politics these days. We'll have an upcoming election in Germany in 2 months. We'll have, Donald Trump getting back into power. World's not going to get any better, so I'm sure I'll have enough anger to spare for a lot of books to talk about in the near-ish future in that regard. So that's roughly what I plan to do. Hopefully no more technical issues, getting more videos out. I'd love to have, a couple more subscribers during the year. That would be really cool. I am not going to, give any numbers because, once again, I'll only be disappointed, I guess. Would it be neat to reach, I don't know, the 1,500, yeah, but that's not a big deal, right? 50 subscribers is possible in like 1 year. I'm sure I can manage that just by doing nothing, basically. 1,750, I doubt it. 2,000, basically impossible unless something weird happens. But, you know, as I said, those numbers are not going to, you know, matter to me in any way, shape or form. I'll continue talking about the Ian MacDonald books. That's certainly something I will not stop. And, yeah. Maybe I'll have cool ideas. Who knows? They could happen. If there's something you guys want me to definitely tackle in 2025, please let me know in the comments. I would very much love to hear that. If there's anything else you want me to do, you can always, you know, message me somewhere. That's basically it, I think. It's been, you know, a year. Could have been better, could have been worse, but at least I'm still here. This is probably at this point the longest running thing I've ever done when it comes to sticking to one project. This is like 4 years of this stuff now, right? That's insane. So the fact that I'm still here is already something I'm very much happy about and very proud of. The fact that I don't think it'll stop anytime soon is also making me very happy. The fact that I've, you know, met a lot of cool people through the channel makes me very, very happy. I hope you'll stick with me. If you have done so since whenever, whether it's, you know, this is your first video or you've been here since my first video all the way back in 2020 in December, I'm incredibly thankful for all of this. Very, very much. Like, seriously, it means a lot to me. It's been something that has brought me through some pretty dark times over the last 4 years. And, yeah. It's cool that it's still here and you're still here. I do very much appreciate that. I don't know what else to say. I hope you had a, you know, at least okay or survivable 2024. And I hope 2025 will be so much better than anything you could possibly imagine, because you all deserve that. And with all of that, I don't know. I'll just say thanks. If you want to talk to me. If you don't want to talk to me, then don't. And keep having fun. Keep doing cool shit. Just be cool people, right? And I'll see you with the next Mouse Mess video tomorrow. And until then, well, Happy New Year.